And it's funny because every time I've done one of these books, people say, "Oh, there's already like an official book about it. What's yours doing that's different?" And like, it is different. It's not a biography of Opeth. It's a song by song analysis of them.
Ghost Cult Magazine welcomes in author and journalist Jordan Blum. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well, man. Thanks for having me.
It is so great to see you. It's been a minute. I don't think we've actually done an interview for Ghost Cult before. We have chatted several times on different podcasts I used to co host, and it was always a pleasure. And we got to profile you and talk about your career in music journalism. But now, here, finally, we're getting to actually enjoy your company and spread the good word to the fans and family of Ghost Cult.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to finally be on it officially.
Yeah, man. We've circled each other for quite a long time. I'm an admirer and a fan of your writing and your work. I actually look at very few other people's work in the field because I'm scared to taint my own work and my
Yeah.
editing of other people's work. So we overlap a lot of our tastes. So typically I don't look at maybe there's like three people I read and you're one of them. So
Oh,
maybe
thanks.
the other one that people would know that's prominent would be Brian Krasman of Meat and Metal. I
Hmm.
love that dude. We worked together briefly, like years before Ghost Cult, and I'm a big fan. And then maybe one other person. So that's it. I really don't, unless it's like a news story, and I know it's going to be like a share of a press release with a little bit of editing and their own,
Yeah.
special sauce on it. I don't really look at people's stuff because I'm
Yeah,
afraid.
neither do I.
I'm literally afraid. I don't want to like have it affect me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're here on the eve of the release of your newest book, which I'm really stoked about because it's straight up my nerd, gonna tickle my nerd funny bone on all the things today. And this is your brand new release, Opeth, Every Album, Every Song. It's coming next week as we record this. It's such a good time for the band. They have a deluxe edition of their latest album coming out. They put a new single out recently. They might have
Hmm.
some more. I think they have some more unreleased material that we might get to hear. But first things first, let's just set the scene for everybody. They might know you more from your journalistic exploits for all your websites. So let's just give our viewers a little background on you before we dive down the nerd black hole of Opeth.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I started writing, I would say professionally around like 20 or 2007. I started writing for my college newspaper, Rider University in New Jersey, if anybody knows that place. And yeah, then I just kind of started building myself up. Like I was writing for places like Examiner and Delusions of Adequacy and Sea of Tranquility. Started writing for Pop Matters about 10 years ago. Now I'm an editor there, which is great. And yeah, slowly but surely, you just kind of build yourself up and see how far you can go. So these days, I do a lot of writing for Consequence. I do a lot of writing for Loudwire, Metal Injection, Prog Magazine, What Culture, which it's a dream come true for some of these places because I've grown up reading them, or it's in the case of like What Culture, watching their videos on YouTube. I'm back. I took like not intentionally. It was like a year and a half of me not getting work at Kerrang, but I've done a couple of reviews recently. So those are the main spots I'm at, and then if other things come up here and there, I always welcome
NBD, only the biggest websites in the world that cover rock and metal. No
them.
worries, no big, no biggie. Just Consequence, the biggest website in the world for music, and Loudwire, the biggest rock and heavy metal website, backed by a giant, monolithic company. So
Yeah.
it's not too bad. Your stuff gets read, and Pop Matters, for those that don't know, hugely influential and the web, and a lot of their articles go viral in terms of they show up on people's phones and tablets.
Mhm.
You don't realize they wind up like embedded into your feeds of like what to read today. So Pop
Right.
Matters, very very important in the great scheme of things. Hugely trafficked websites, which
Mhm.
means your stuff gets read, which is great. A lot of our people, as I often say, you have to write because you love it anyway. It's just like being in a
Mhm.
band. You have to write because you want to, and it's nice to get paid when you do. I know that you've carved out a very nice niche for yourself. It's very admirable, especially covering our genres of music, our favorite, underground stuff, sometimes some mainstream stuff. I am a fan of your retrospective pieces. Again, I don't read too many of those because I write a lot of those myself, and I don't want to cross the streams, Ghostbuster style. But yeah, man, I'm a fan, and it's been great to see you grow and
Nice.
expand. These websites, Injection and others, are lucky to have you also because you're bringing that voice about a lot of times progressive music that doesn't, for a long time it's like the geeks were picked on. It was like
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds. We had our underwear pulled inside out and shoved into lockers, and now we rule the whole earth. And suddenly Rush is getting name dropped in like, movies and television, and people are like, huh?
Yeah. Dream Theater's winning a Grammy.
Dream
So
Theater wins a Grammy
amazing.
over like a stacked field. That's the other thing. It's like it's not just so much that they won the Grammy, they beat Gojira and Mastodon, and on top of those albums,
Yeah.
especially Hushed and Grim by Mastodon's, or arguably one of their best records, and they didn't even
For
win for
sure.
it. So, I'm proud of Dream Theater. I think over time, no pun intended, over time, my love of Dream Theater kind of flattens. But early on, Dream Theater and that heyday, amazing. No disrespect to anybody. I've interviewed Mangini. He's terrific. I never would have had my bingo card saying that Portnoy and Labrie and them would be friends again. So that's
Right.
awesome. But yeah, man. Opeth, man. So Opeth is your latest book. Every album, every song. I mean, it's an undertaking. They have a humongous catalog. And, where I wanted to start with the band and I wanted to start with you with the book is, going in, obviously, look, first of all, I'm sure the criterion for writing one of these books is let's pick a popular band that has a worthy catalog, just generally accepted that people would be interested, which,
Hmm.
yes, Opeth is one of the most interesting bands ever. Their whole history, it's mind blowing to me at how, they've progressed and changed and evolved in a positive sense. But also, Opeth is like, perhaps only a few bands, Metallica and In Flames come to mind, that took such a wild bunch of left turns that they've split the fan base pretty evenly between there's a line in the sand and it's like I don't go past that line, and you have Metallica fans who are like, I don't even like the Black Album. They died then, or they died with Cliff, which I hate hearing. That's not true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
In Flames, soon as they got commercial, that was the end, which is not true either. But Opeth also suffers from that's like before Prague and Prague.
Pretty much, yeah. It's amazing how divisive it gets, how passionate it gets. I guess to use like what the cool kids are saying, like the Opeth stands are just like they want to fight about it.
Right. And like the genesis of their changes really, of course, look, it all begins and ends with Michael. He's wonderful and brilliant. I think of him like a Devin Townsend. I
Yeah.
can't even comprehend how his brain must work.
Huh.
But at the same time, like if your heart is just not in these progressive death metal anymore, or blackened death metal, whatever the different shades of Opeth albums, the first, let's say, 10 years of the band, if your heart is just not in making one more of those albums and you want to pursue these other things and still call it Opeth, I think that's your right. And fans
Yeah.
don't have to like it, but you have to serve yourself.
Yeah. I mean, after Watershed, he made half of another album that sounded like it. And he said this just doesn't, I think it was Watershed, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. He said, like, it sounds like another Watershed. Let me ask Mendez what he thinks. And he played it for Mendez. And it's interesting because, yeah, like Michael is the leader. He's not quite, reading up on it, he's not quite like the dictator that I think some people may think. Like he is the leader, he gets the final word, but he's always very open to what other people think. But Mendez is always kind of just like the quiet one who just plays his part and does a great job at it. But he's not one to ever kind of start shit, basically. And he didn't, but like Michael went up to him and said, am I right? Or is this sounding not as passionate as it has? And he said, no, it sounds like this is what we've just done. Like you need to try something else. And then, he said, you're right. Scrap that. Let's do Heritage. And the rest is history.
right. And I think there was even a moment probably for Michael where I'm gonna take this as gospel, but I read the Opeth anniversary book,
Mm-hmm.
and there was some talk where he was like, maybe I'll just keep the black and death metal for Bloodbath, which he was the
Mm.
original singer of. Him and a band basically conceived by him and Jonas from Catatonia, who I also love.
Yeah,
Let's get frowny all day long. Let's get
yeah.
gloomy. He was like, no, I can't even do this and take it seriously. It's like I enjoy it. I love my friends. I want to tour with them and have some shenanigans and go to record stores around the world. I don't really want to make this music anymore. And that doesn't mean that they don't perform the classics, with care. They do. I know that we'll get into some later day things like let's do an unplugged Demon of the Fall, which I liked, but a lot of people apparently revolted. They were on board until that moment. Some people, I'm like, well, if you came this far, you can't jump off now. Maybe you can, but yeah, I just always find it interesting. It's like the fans cannot, as much as fans feel like they have ownership. Like I supported this. I remember trading tapes for Metallica. How dare they make a rock song? How dare they make Nothing Else Matters and call it Metallica? So, I understand that fans feel like part of something, and
Yeah.
I do want to caution a lot of, and I built my entire life around loving music and being a musician and all these things, and I do caution people, when you build your whole identity around a band or a genre, that's not a good idea, because also the failings of that genre, the failings of those people, especially if you have like a pop cultural person that you really identify with and build your whole everything around, and then they fail spectacularly in the public eye, something horrible happens or they do something horrible. Now how do you separate yourself? Like, well, now I can't like openly stand that person anymore. Now what do I do with myself? It's kind of like breaking up from a long relationship. Now who am I?
Yeah.
So I always find it interesting, and yes, Opeth fans will do mental acrobatics to justify or defend. I don't think you have to defend your taste to anybody. I do think there are people who blatantly troll, and they're trying to get a reaction out of you. But just generally speaking, Opeth, it's not an argument that they are great or that they. I don't think they're any less great now than they were at whatever someone else's zenith is. And Watershed is half a great album, and it's weird because there's the stuff on it that works so well. And then some of it is just like, this is flat, and you can tell. Anywho, backing it up now that we did a whole diatribe on just genre tastes and bands falling in and out of favor and in and out of love with fans. How do you begin researching a book like this? I would love to write a book someday. I have not.
I have a lot of experience, I think, at this point, having done the other two books and doing these retrospective pieces. It's always the same process. It's just the book, it's doing it for every album, basically. Um, but basically, every album is treated like a chapter, and even the intro before it. So what I basically do is I think of my own feelings. I listen to it a lot and kind of settle on how I feel about every song and what I think it feels connected to what's around it. And then honestly, I start at Wikipedia. I don't know if I should say that or not, but I start on Wikipedia. Not that Wikipedia is a good source. It's not. Any academic, any teacher will tell you, but all of the footnotes, all of the hyperlinks, I start with that and I see like just what I can find out of the Wikipedia pages for the band, for the albums, putting that all together, going to all these different websites, sometimes going to like YouTube interviews. Luckily, Opeth have done a lot of like hour-long documentaries, especially for like the mid-period albums. So that itself can take hours to just watch and transcribe and all. But basically, that's what I do is just try to assemble as much research as I can. And luckily for all three books now, I've had kind of an official book to help me. So this one, there was Rocket 88's The Book of Opeth. And it's funny because every time I've done one of these books, people say, oh, there's already like an official book about it. What's yours doing that's different? And like, it is different. It's not a biography of Opeth. It's a song by song analysis of them. Lots of overlap, of course, because there's still background information. But so I use that book and you start to realize, when you start to do research, there are through lines between all of it. Like if multiple sources are mentioning the same things, if this seems like an important part that multiple people are talking about, you kind of know that you have to mention that. And then once I get it all together, I annotate, I take notes, I just kind of pull up a blank piece of paper and basically outline every paragraph. So in the intro, what do I want to talk about? What do I want to set up in terms of how this transitions out of the last album into this one? How was it made? Where was it recorded? What were the ambitions? Like sales, reception, reviews, the tour, and then usually a conclusion. So I just kind of outline like every paragraph for the intro of each chapter, and then song by song, I just kind of write a paragraph or two about it and try to have a good mixture. I think something I learned since doing the Jethro Tull one was that one was too scholarly because I was so obsessed with like synonyms. I was so obsessed with my word choice that I started to use things that I forgot what I was talking about. So the last two, and especially the Opeth one, I think it's more accessible without without losing any of the insight that you need and any of the deeper analysis. But a lot of it, it just comes as I start writing. I just kind of keep it on the song in a loop, and just as I'm going, I go from start to finish. And do I want to talk about the music here? Do I want to talk about the lyrics, the vocals? It's just kind of as each song plays in each section of the song, like what stands out about it.
Welcome to the life of a writer.
Yeah,
Am I on the right path? You know, biographies are invaluable, and I don't know why anyone would criticize the use of them. Also, I feel like Rocket 88's book of Opeth quotes Michael so much that I read
mhm,
most of that book in his voice in my head. Like when he
yeah,
does like a little rap to the audience in a concert. Michael and Peter Lindbergh used to ride bicycles down the street and look in the window shops at guitars in the pawn shops. And so
yeah,
it's not very analytical. It's just a history.
yeah.
It's just a blow by blow history of the comings and goings of their career, of their lives, and it's not a critical look at the albums. It really isn't.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And a lot of biographies are not. You know, one of my favorite books is I'm a humongous Anthrax fan. As you can see, my back patch is on my vest there behind me. And Scott Ian's I'm the Man. He talks about every album, but not deep. You know, he's
Yeah.
talking about like in my life at that time, this. You know, so I just feel like yeah, some people will never give you a break and let you live. Now, heading in, again,
Yeah.
these are three bands you're very passionate about. You have to be to write these books. Would it be hard for you to write about a band you're not as passionate about?
For sure. I think you'd have to fake it a bit more, like fake the enthusiasm. But I see it as the same way kind of as writing like a music review. Like you never want to be outwardly negative, but you want to be critical. I find like a lot of our colleagues, that's one of the problems I kind of have with music journalism, at least in my sphere, is that so many people are afraid to be critical because maybe they want to get the quote on the press release, or they want to be friends with the artist. Maybe they are friends with the artist. Whereas I always kind of pride myself as like being honest, even if I know that the person's going to see this. I know for a fact they're going to see this. So I've kind of trained myself to say negative things in a nice way. So I think I'd be able to do it with the book of just saying like, here's even with Opeth, it's like here's some stuff that's not as good as the rest or something I don't like, but I always try to approach it as objectively as possible in that I respect what they're doing. I appreciate what they're doing, even if it's not for me. Like, objectively, this is still a well composed song, or this is a big risk that they're taking that maybe not everyone will like, but you have to give them respect for trying. So I think I could do it to some degree.
Right. It's going to come off cheesy, but I'm going to quote Almost Famous and say, be honest and unmerciful. And it is great advice, even though
Yeah.
Lester Bangs himself was cynical and not a fan of heavy metal. Maybe had he lived, he might have enjoyed some 80s thrash metal. I think he would have vibed with early Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and Anthrax. So now, conversely, about Opeth, if you came in with preconceived notions and then you built this body of research and then re-listened to and analyzed each song and wrote them, you know, did your impressions coming in change coming out, or did your, let's say if your mental tier list was already in place, did it change at all now that the book is done?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think for the most part, it stayed the same. Like I've always said, that it's hard to pick a favorite Opeth album because I have four of them, depending on like what phase of Opeth, what kind of Opeth. I always go. Well, now I guess it would be like Pal Communion, Ghost Reverie, Still Life, and Damnation. And I know Pal Communion is a tough, is the controversial one of them all, but I will stand by that. But I think like one of the ways I divide it in my head beforehand changed for sure because I always heard Still Life as the next era for them. But now I kind of hear Still Life as the fourth and final part of the first era. Like it's closer to My Arms Rehearsed, like sonically than I remembered it being. Even though I think it's definitely the best of that, and it's one of their best for sure. So I would say like I rank that maybe a little bit lower than I did going into it, whereas I grew to appreciate the first two and Heritage more than I ever did. Like I'm still not super big on them. And kind of going back to what you said before, like I always feel like wherever I'm at in the metal community, I'm the prog guy. So I typically don't go for like the really heavy. Like I always say, metal has to have an acoustic guitar, or it's got to have some kind of mellower section. If it's just straight up like death metal blast beats, it's not for me. But Heritage is exactly what I was talking about. Like I appreciate Heritage, but I see it very much as like the stepping stone to Pale Communion. But I definitely like it more, and I appreciate it more for what it led to and how much of a kind of fuck you to the naysayers that it was.
As
That
it
I,
needed to be. And
yeah,
I think the triumph of Pale Communion is how great it is in spite of itself, in spite
yeah,
of challenges, in spite of every negative voice, maybe even in their own community, maybe in their own label. You know, I'm sure there were people, you have to just tune that out if you're an artist. I'm sure, Michael's an artist above everything else. So you have to
yeah,
just tune all those voices out. I find I love Incauda Venenem. I really do. Like, it really took me over for like that whole year. And Pale Communion's brilliant. I like Heritage a lot. It does feel like a Per Weberg adios. Like, welcome to the intro part and a couple of other little pieces here and there, and then they Rick Wright hit him right out of the band like Pink Floyd The Wall. Like,
oh yeah,
peace out. I'll play the piano.
yeah.
Other guys can play piano. You don't have to. So it's interesting. And again, I got into Opeth with the early black metal, sort of blackened
Hmm.
death metal stuff, and of course, I love Blackwater Park. Ghost Reveries, I like. We just discussed that a little bit earlier. And then, why is Damnation so brilliant? It's not just that it's brilliant; it's so brilliant on every level. It's so
Yeah,
flawless. It's such a masterpiece, 10 of 10 album for me that it almost ruins everything else I listen to because it's so good, and I can't ever. It's like, this is coloring everything the wrong way for me.
yeah. I mean, Damnation is just perfect. Like it is. It's hard to like talk about it and not exaggerate, but it's like heaven in music. There are a few albums that I would say, and I'm pretty much an atheist, but it's like if heaven, what the idea of heaven, if that was in music, like Damnation, it's just like a cloud. It's just perfect sorrow, the songwriting. I mean, damn it, like that leads into why I think Opeth is the best at what they do. Like I always say, there are certain bands that are just the best at what they do. Like Dream Theater, they own what they do. Between Them Buried and Me are the best at what they do. And Opeth, there's so many bands that go for that, and some of them are great. But you don't have Ackerfeld songwriting other spots. You don't have that variety. And yeah, Damnation is just one flawless bit of songwriting after another.
It's mind blowing. I don't know if you got to see those shows at the Apollo before the world shut down. Were you at any either
Hmm.
of those?
No, I haven't seen Opeth live since the Pale Communion tour with In Flames, I think,
Okay.
unfortunately. But my
Yeah.
like the first time I saw them was the Damnation Deliverance tour with Porcupine Tree.
Again, also, and maybe we need to talk a little bit about Steven. He factors hugely into the value system of
Yeah,
Michael. It's really unique and refreshing to see two artists work off of each other, producing each other, writing for each other. Hey, do you want to come and sing this? I don't really want to play this guitar part. I think you would bring something to it. It's so interesting. Artists are so possessive, like their songs are their babies. And they're so, like you have to be selfish because you're living with this forever in a certain
yeah.
sense. I know some people are like, I don't even care. Once the record's done, I don't care anymore. But while the record's happening, I'm like Mozart about it. I'm going to be insane. So it is a really fascinating study in dynamics of a friendship as well as a musical partnership.
Yeah, and like that's something that was really fascinating is now that like they're best friends. They've done like on camera trivia music history. Like they hang out, they made Storm Corrosion. But the story of how they kind of started being friends was fascinating. That Acker felt like I got into Porcupine Tree in high school. I got into Opeth at the start of college. So around when like right when Ghost Referees came out is where I got into Opeth. And I didn't realize at the time that Porcupine Tree was so much more well known that like Acker felt reaching out up to Wilson. He was like talking to one of his idols, like an established voice. And he kind of thought like, why would he ever want to produce one of my albums? And he got a response back saying, yeah, I'd love to come, with Blackwater Park. So it was interesting to see the humility that Ackerfeld had that time and how much they clicked. And you definitely see like a symbiotic relationship there because as much as like Wilson added the Mellotron and added like the softer sound to Blackwater Park, and the production is definitely the best so far. You wouldn't have In Absentia without Opeth. You would have like something more closer to like Light Bulb Sun for Porcupine Tree. So it's very clear that those albums, 2002, 2003, especially with Damnation Deliverance, are very much reciprocated with each other.
Right, and Steven has maybe bar none the best set of ears in the whole world. I mean,
Yeah.
his remixes and remasters of albums, his own work. I still love The Raven Who Refused to Sing. I mean, it's like I'm never gonna get topped for me in his other work.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about this Porcupine Tree comeback, and then I'm pretty sure it's gonna be done forever. So
I
I
think so.
urge you, if you care about that band, go see them now because they're definitely not sure they're ever going to do anything ever again. It seems like he's putting a pin in that for a long time to come after.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, that's what he said the last time, and then was it now like 13 years later? But yeah, I mean, you never know. I I I know a lot of people with that were kind of skeptical that like oh, whenever his career starts to dip, he'll reach back into his pocket and pull out Porcupine Tree. But I don't think that's true because I could be wrong, but I think his last album was his best selling album at least. Like he seems to be ascending at least commercially.
Yeah, he loved that pop record. I was like, not quite for me. I appreciate it's against like Devi. I worship and love Devi. I don't
Yeah.
love everything he does, but I love him. I
And
would
that
have
goes
gave.
right back to like my point. Like I was not really into To the Bone or The Future Bites is the last one. Yeah,
Yeah,
To the
yeah,
Bone I do like. I defended the hell out of that, but
yeah. It's good.
um
It's good for what it is. I don't think it's quite for me,
yeah,
but
exactly.
especially after the last two.
Yeah,
Those two records were in a certain realm for me. But again, Steven, he obviously has to factor into the Opeth story, as Michael has to factor into the Steven story at some
yeah.
point down the road. So yeah, just fascinating stuff. We could go all day on this. I could at least. Just in general, did you feel like after the book was done, you set out for what you accomplished? Was there anything you ran out of time and didn't get to put in that you would have, or you would in a future addendum, perhaps?
Um, no, I think I was pretty satisfied once I got to the end of it. I did all I could to ensure that I like mentioned everything they ever did because there's always going to be somebody who says, "What about this one time they did this and it was bootleg recording?" It's like you didn't talk about that. And the book promises every song. So I, but of course now they put out like the new track from the last album that I didn't even hate to admit it I didn't even hear yet because I've just been so busy. So I'm sure I would amend it with that. But no, I think it accomplished everything I wanted it to. It took the longest to write of the three books, but I think I'm most proud of it. And of the three, like Opeth is probably my favorite of the three bands. So I took the most like, pleasure in really diving into it. And I think that does come through on the page. I hope it does.
I think it does. It
Yeah,
does for me. Just a couple more for you, man.
yeah,
Again,
yeah.
this is a treat for me. I don't know about you. This is the
No,
best.
yeah.
It's all downhill from here this week. I wonder if you had a tier list for their live stuff. I guess they really haven't done a definitive live album yet for this era, which I imagine at
Hmm.
some point they will for this prog era, let's call it. The stoner prog era, maybe. They haven't really quite done the full deal, I imagine, because the world shut down. Maybe there's material, maybe there's recordings, maybe there's video, we don't know. But up to now, do you have a favorite Opeth live album or DVD filmography thing?
Yeah, I would probably go with the first one, Lamentations. I think like the nostalgia of seeing them when I was like, how old was I then? Like 16 when that stuff came out and seeing them at the Trocadero in Philly. And like, I still, again, like, as we said, like Damnation is a perfect album. Deliverance is amazing. I don't know if it's their best for the style, but it's just like, I don't think they've topped the one-two punch of those albums together, especially since they were supposed to be a double album. Like you don't get better than that. And I feel like there's more cohesion with that set because the music was made around the same time. That you, the other ones maybe has they have a wider array of songs and styles. The production is maybe better. The stage show is more elaborate maybe, but like the intimacy of that show and the cohesion of it, you just can't beat.
I agree. I would say I wish I could get the set list from that production and the video work and the modern video production and live recording of the Roundhouse. But that's just
Hmm.
I'm selfish, and I'm a selfish jerk of a fan a little bit, and my, hey, we should have the, yeah, I do that sometimes. Just me internally. This is not me, the critic, but me, the fan. And
Yeah.
then just finally, just I think this is just inherently interesting. If Michael were to read this book, what do you think he would get out of it?
That's a good question. That's a scary idea, though.
I know.
um,
That's why I asked.
this might sound like I'm patting myself on the back, and I'm not trying to, but I would hope that he appreciates all the defending that I did of the stuff that is so polarizing. Like I have to remember how I ranked their albums, but I know I put Pal Communion like way at the top. I think Pal Communion is a masterpiece. For me, it's easily the best thing they've done since they went towards Prague, with the last album ranked a close second. So I hope he would appreciate me just defending that stuff, defending him and his integrity as an artist. And I've always respected artists like him who basically, they want the sales, they want the positive reviews, they want the fans to love them, of course, but he's always been one who says, this is what I want to do, this is what I want us to do. If you're with us, great. If you bail out, sorry, but I don't care. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I've always respected the hell out of him for that. So that's what I would want him to get out of it the most, is just more of like an understanding of where Opeth were coming from with these changes, and an appreciation for how much of what they're doing now was embedded in their stuff all along. You go back to like the jazzy bass lines of the first two albums, and like the clear love of like Camel and Joni Mitchell, Nick Drake. Like it's clearer now, but I think I'm sure there's a quote, I've read quotes from him where people who say like we've changed all of a sudden haven't been listening closely enough because this stuff's always kind of been foreshadowed. So I would hope he just says, all right, here's a guy who kind of gets it.
I'm rooting for the 65, 70-year-old Michael to do his like Kraftwerk Can album, because that's also inside of him, and we
Yeah.
haven't fully got it yet because it's not him, you know, because he still loves guitar shit
Yeah.
and solos. Jordan Blum, man, this has been an absolute treasure and a treat for me.
Me too.
Opeth, every album, every song is out now in the UK. You can get it soon here in the US, at least by the time people see this. We will link everything in the descriptions, and even though you write for some of our competition, I hope
Huh.
people will follow you and continue to read and support you because you're awesome.
Thanks so much, man. This has been a pleasure as always.